Let's talk about the supplies that we'll be using in this class. So I'm going to be working on watercolor paper to create yummy abstracts. And I'll be working on the Canson Heritage 140 pound cold press 100% cotton watercolor paper. You are welcome to use any watercolor paper you have on hand. This technique really lends itself well to most papers that accept wet medium, so definitely experiment with whatever paper you already have. And we will be cutting a 9x12 piece of paper in half and using each side, but you can play with any size that you'd like. I'm going to be using acrylic inks in today's class, but you can substitute these for watercolors. They would work great too. And I'll be using the Daler Rowney Sepia, Amsterdam Turquoise Green, because this reminds me of that yummy verdigris copper color that copper gets when it's really old. And then I'll also be using Daler Rowney Indigo. I'm going to also be using some black ink. So this is the Kuretake black ink. You could also use something like Higgins Black Magic India ink. That would work well. And then I'll be using some metallic inks. So I'm using the gold mica brilliant gold ink and the gold mica paste that Kuretake makes. They're my very favorite. They are the most brilliant and shimmery in the light, so I'm totally obsessed with these. I'm also going to be using a variety of things to add water to the paper. So I have a couple paintbrushes that I usually use. This is my Raphael Soft Aqua Quill brush in the size 0. And I also like the Princeton Neptune quill brushes, and this is a size 4. So you'll see me using those. I'm also using a pipette, and these are super fun for dipping in the ink and getting water in them. So I'm using one of those. And I'll be using a couple of dip pens, but you don't have to use the dip pen or the ink if you want. You can substitute, but I'm using a regular dip pen with a sharp edge, and I'm using my Kakamori brass nib pen, which allows me to dip and draw circles, which you can't usually do with a regular straight nib. So I'll be using those. I'll also say that you can substitute any of your supplies. Some of my favorite substitutions is a pencil, some Micron pens if you like the pen work. Posca pens are also one of my favorite things to substitute for marks and dots. You can also substitute in there some Neocolor 2 crayons or any pencils and pens that you want to experiment with. And one other thing I want to mention is I've made myself a little cheat sheet for my studio of favorite marks, and so I kind of recommend that you do this too. And I just drew these out in like 2-inch square boxes on a piece of paper. Drew in some favorite marks so that I could reference it while working. And I love this because as you're working you get stuck and you're like, what could I do now? And here we could look right up and say, ooh, I love these lines with dots on them, or ooh, I love these tick marks, or ooh, I love these raindrops. And instantly you've got new ideas and directions to go. So I highly recommend this. And I just took mine and cut them out into a fun shape and stuck them on another piece of paper. So you don't have to do that, but I thought it was really fun. So I will be referencing this personally for just mark ideas and things that I like to do. So just thought I'd mention that's super fun. You could also use stencils and things like that on these if you'd like. Lots of directions that you could go. So I want to show you all the little fun things that we'll do in class today. So let's get started. So I've got our paper down, and what I'm going to do is show you the first way that I create. So go ahead and shake up your inks if you're using inks. If you're using watercolors or something like that, go ahead and squirt them with some water and let those be activating. I'm going to go ahead and unscrew the lids to these, even though I'm super clumsy and will hopefully not knock one of these over and make a big mess. And the ones that I've pulled out is the sepia. I actually pulled out the indigo instead of the Payne's gray, but that's okay. And the turquoise, because indigo is what I used on these original inspiration pieces that I'm going to show you how we're making. So the first one I'm going to do starts with the pipette. And what we're going to do is fill that full of clean water. And we just want to take that pipette and spread a bubble of water along this paper. And we are going to then have some fun. So just go ahead, work kind of fast. Don't think too hard about it. Don't get hung up on if you've got something too far over this way or that way. I want you to have some fun here and relax. Part of the creating for me is the fun that goes into this part of the process. And then just pick a color. And I make sure I squeeze out the top and start with fresh color. If you've got a stopper that's actually working, mine, one of these stoppers doesn't work, but it does have color on the edge, and I can just tap it right into the water and watch it go. And I could use a pipette if I needed some more ink than this is letting me get. Because I do like, man, this is my favorite part, watching that ink just spread. Look at it go. I love that. Favorite part. So just, ooh, watch it run. Oh, see, just watching that run. Super fun. And don't worry about, oh, did I get too much here or there? This part is fun, and we're going to let time and letting that water dry kind of do the work for us. Because once you do this, you need to set it to the side and just let it dry, because if you're trying to use a heat gun on a big bead of water, it's just going to be frustrating and take forever to dry. And I really just want time to do its fanciness here. And I do think I might want a little bit of ink in my pipette, and then to clean the pipette I just fill it with water and squeeze it out a couple times, and that works great. So if you've got any of your inks that the little stopper's not working like mine, get a pipette. Totally fixes your problem. Oh, I love this teal, but I want it to be spread out some, and then we can just squeeze the ink out. I can come over here to my thing of water, just squeeze it a couple times, and we get all that ink back out of our pipette. And you can get a whole bundle of these online. I was looking on one of the shopping sites, and you could get like a bundle of 10 for $10 or a bundle of 200 for $10. And so guess what I have now? I have a bundle of 200. Because for $10 I was like, well, I guess I'll have these forever. Okay, so now I've got one of these working. I'm going to go with my bigger quill brush. I could go with my smaller one if I wanted. I'm actually dipping this in the dirty water that I just created, but I could start with the clean. I keep a couple of different things of water over here just to keep stuff moving. I don't want to have to get up every time I paint something and get new water. I want to be able to move along. So 3 or 4 little containers of water is super handy. And now I'm going to do a little bit different here, and same thing, I'm going to run the ink on this little water like we just did, but let's get this back in the pipette. But we're going to watch it kind of spread and do a little bit different than it just did in the big bead of water, and just see what's it going to do, like what can we create. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can see how this would be amazing. Ooh, look what that's doing. You can see how this would be amazing with watercolor also. And then if you're getting it where you're thinking, oh, it's not moving around enough, then get a little bit of cold water, clean water, cold, a little bit of clean water, and you can add some extra water in here if you need to, and just kind of spread those out a little bit and help them along their way. I really like what that's doing right there. Part of abstract art and my enjoyment of it is the serendipitous nature of what am I going to create? Like, how can I get this to do amazing, unexpected things? I don't want to know that the outcome when I get started. I love the surprise of what are we going to create with these colors today if I just do this, or I just do that, or I just experiment, or what if I laid this color in like right here, or whatever. I love not knowing. And I really love this whole center section right here. A little different than the piece that we've already created, but that's okay. I like to keep a lot of paper towels handy too, if I didn't mention that. But this is a microfiber cleaning cloth. most favorite cleaning cloth to have available when you're creating art, because especially if you're working with pastels and things that are powdery, you can wipe your fingers off without having to go wash your hands. It's amazing. Okay, so I love this. I want to add maybe a little more of the dark in here now that I'm looking. And you know, you can use the inks and things to come in and do some mark making and some lines, but at this point everything's still wet, so I don't want to manipulate it too much. I kind of want it to do its thing. So we'll come back on top with some mark making with this technique. Let me get that out of there. And we're gonna let these dry now. You're gonna have to set them to the side, put them on the floor, go away, eat some lunch, and come back in a little while. Oh, one other thing I wanted to do. Getting ahead of myself here. Over here on the line one, actually, after it's had time to kind of play and do some of its stuff, that's when I'm gonna take my little paintbrush here and kind of just add in some additional movement, spread these out just a little bit, and just see, you know, what can we create there. Just mashing those together. All right, so now we're going to set these to the side and let them dry, and I'll be back. We have been patient and we've waited for our piece to dry, so now we're ready to come back and do some mark making. So I'm actually going to do some black ink. So again, you can use different black inks, whatever you happen to have. And I'm going to use a dip pen with my ink. So you could use your Posca pen or your Micron pens if you don't want to do this part. And I'm going to come in here and do some asymmetric writing, which is basically looks like writing. You might think it says something, but you're like, what does that say? I can't actually read it. And that's kind of the beauty. Now you can anybody can interpret, like, what is that writing in there? Does it say something? What might it say? You can kind of leave that up to somebody's imagination. So I'm using it as pretty mark making, maybe a little surprise if you look close enough. And I'm going to do that over here too. See, I like these with the yummy sharp point because you get really nice thin writing, so it's not too much. It's not like overwhelming the piece when I came back, but when you get closer, you're like, oh, what is that in there? And then you could come back and do some lines. If you're thinking, I don't know if I like that for my piece, definitely why I do stuff like my little mark making piece. So this is the point that you could have this and look up and say, what do I like? And I've discovered after doing this in lots of different places, I like dots. I like these lines with the little dots on it, like little pearls, like little necklaces almost. And so I also like hash marks where it's just lines like this, just rows of lines. And that tends to be some of the stuff that I go towards. But you know, you could also use this as an exercise to say, well, I always use these hash marks. I'm going to use a mark I don't normally use, so maybe I'll use dots, or maybe I'll use raindrops, or maybe I'll use little V's, or maybe I'll use little triangles. Use this as a chance to step outside your comfort zone if you're feeling like, okay, I'm in a little rut, I want to try something different. After I do that, I'm going to come back with the gold, and you do have to shake the gold up. And make sure I got the ink off of this first pen, because I don't like the ink to dry on my nibs there. And then let's come back and do some yummy stuff. So for this first piece, I'm kind of thinking I want to do some circles. I always have a little scrap piece of paper, old pieces of art, whatever, here to the side, so I can kind of get my pen started and make sure I'm not going to have a big glob on something. And then I'm just going to go for it. I want this to have some circles, and you see why I like this pen. It lets you do those circles, but you could have done that with a gold pen too if you've got, or silver or bronze or whatever floats your boat, black or white. Could have done that. I'm going to do this one right up here. Oh yeah, I can see some prettiness happen already. And I'm in a terrible habit of drawing here and moving this way on my paper, and you see I'm right-handed. So I'm making a conscious effort now when I do pieces where I'm doing a lot of work and I have two stuck down to my page, trying to work this way. So if you're left-handed, work this way. If you're right-handed, try to work from this top corner and coming down to this bottom corner so you're not running your hand on top of any of your pieces. But I also keep big rulers handy on my little table over here, and this is just a great big yardstick, and it's really nice for keeping your hand off your artwork. You can just kind of hold it on one side, have this as your hand rest. And now this is really good too if you're working with pastels, because pastels can smear. Now you can work on your piece without smearing your hand all over your other piece of art that you're working on. So I just got this at the hardware store in the paint department, and it was like $2. They're cheap. Just get a long piece of wood to be your hand rest and save yourself from ruining a piece that you're like, whoa, that was my favorite, and look what I just did. Because you don't know how many times I've done that. Ah, the joys of making art with materials that smudge. Especially with the pastels. Oh my goodness. And we could put pastels in this too. I didn't even mention that. I mentioned the crayons and the markers and all that, but soft pastels. Those would be gorgeous. Okay, so I'm loving that. I'm also thinking that maybe I want some areas of dots. Don't be afraid to move your paper around if you need to move it around. I want all these areas as the light hits it to be this gorgeous little shimmer, this little pop. And no specific way that I'm doing this. I'm just like, oh, this little area needs some dots, or that little area. Feel like I'm, you know, this happy little tree. I love making stuff where I'm not so worried about the outcome. It's more about, ooh, let's play and experiment with our supplies and just see what can I create today, because some of my best pieces are made on days where I'm not trying so hard. Cut the music on, just kind of relax and just see what space is calling to you to do what mark and what area are you kind of thinking. I used to sit at my art table and I would think, I need to make a masterpiece today, and then I'd leave all frustrated. And now I'm so glad I've moved past that angry art phase. Ooh, look how pretty this is! Oh my goodness, that's really pretty. And if I kind of shine that to the light, let me bring this up and we can shine it. Look how pretty that gold sparkles in there. Oh, gorgeous. And then we can come back and work on our other piece. And I'm kind of feeling like circle right here. And you don't have to do these circles. This is just my own little mark making, what inspires me in this moment. Ooh, look at that. And in this moment, I'm inspired by lines with dots on them. Gold, dots in general. That yummy teal that looks like the verdigris copper that's aged over the years. So you'll notice, like when you're creating, you'll get into your little art phases. You know, there's famous artists, there's some like they'd go through their red phase or their blue phase and, you know, things like that. And you'll just notice that as you get excited about some of your art materials, that you'll go through phases where you're like, I love this dip pen more than any other art thing that I have. So let's create with it every day. Or you'll go through where you're like, I love this teal. And you're like, let's just make everything teal. And I'm kind of in a gold dot phase. And maybe the next video that we get to, I'll be like, ooh, let's experiment with some other stuff and step outside our comfort zone. And that's how we'll discover the next thing that we are newly obsessed with. I mean, that's how I've discovered these things. I get a art box subscription in the mail every month, and every one of my favorite things have been a random supply that's appeared that I didn't even know was going to be in the box. And I thought, oh my goodness, new favorite supply. I'm all about the next shiny thing. I'm like, ooh, now I love this, and ooh, now I love that. All right, here we go. Just getting some mark making in. So I'm really loving what we have going on here. You'll notice on this piece I was kind of sticking to the lighter areas for the dots, but I wasn't being like super careful about it. In this piece I was sticking to the darker area for the dots. I think I'm going to show you one more thing for the gold. I'm going to use this other gold. Pull out a little palette knife, which I might not have mentioned early on because this just came to me. And I'm going to use the Kakamori paste, the mica paste, just to kind of show you what we've got there. So I'm going to get it started, and then I'm going to do some little swooshes of gold here on this. And I might do it this way. See, it's like a liner, which I love, and maybe one right up here. And what I love about this is now I can take my little palette knife. Ooh, look at that. It's these moments where I'm like, oh yeah, totally what I was looking for. Just a little extra, little bling bling there on my piece. And I could have done that with the ink, but I like this real thick paste to just be very specific about where do I want to put that. And even though it's very specific, at the same time, it's kind of unpredictable. Like, I can't exactly get it maybe where I'm thinking, but I can get it close because I chose to do it with a palette knife. Oh, look how beautiful that is. Oh my goodness. Okay, so once you get that all done, we can peel the tape. And usually when I'm using tape, I'm going edge to edge, but I used tape on this because it was so much water. I kind of wanted to make it lay back flat when we were letting it dry. And if you tape it down, you're less likely to have all that warpage. And so we're going to do this. If you're using a cotton paper, the artist tape usually comes off it very easily. If you're using a paper that's got a percentage of cotton in it, the rest of it is usually wood pulp. And a lot of papers have no cotton in it, and it's all wood pulp. And the wood pulp tends to grab the tape and tear your paper. And a cotton paper will tear too, but the cotton paper generally tears if it's still wet anywhere, so you want to make sure it's super dry. If you're peeling and you're thinking, oh, it's tearing my paper, because I've tried lots of different papers, if you'll take your little heat gun and heat the tape up a little bit, that will relax the tape and make it easier to peel sometimes, so try that. Make sure the paper is completely dry. Peel it at an angle, kind of not super fast. We're not in a hurry here. That tears the paper if you go too fast. So kind of peel at an angle and take your time, and then you're most likely to have success and not tear your paper. Another thing that you could do is use a paper larger than your finished piece is going to be, and then if you tear the edge, you can then come back and cut it off. It doesn't matter. Or you could plan on matting it under a mat board, and you could cover the edge. So lots of choices there. Oh, look how beautiful that is. And then if I were going to sign this, I'd just sign it right down at the very bottom edge there. But look how beautiful these are. Check it out. I love the way that gold shines. Look at this one. I like doing more than one. And a lot of times I like doing like 4 or 6, and then you've got different options and you've kind of created a collection. So I like doing a whole series of things that I can then have a set of, and then if one didn't work out or one got dirty, I could be like, oh, let me fix that. And I just noticed one element that I did on my original pieces. You can see here I did gold writing and I did some splecks of color. So this one has flecks of black, and I also used some dragging here through the ink that I didn't do today, so that's really fun. So let's talk real quick about that and then we'll wrap it up. I've got little plastic pieces that I can use as mark making tools. These are from the Jelly Plate. You can also get some from the Catalyst company. I've got several wedges that have shapes on them. And a lot of times when the ink is wet, you can kind of drag one of these through the ink and get something like these really lovely marks as an additional mark making element on your piece. So that's super fun. Something to keep in mind and try. And the other thing is we can take some of our ink. We could pick a color. For instance, in this one, maybe I want to do the turquoise. So let's open that turquoise up. I've got a brush full of water, and I might just dip that down into the turquoise. Just kind of get it started maybe on another piece of paper just to see that you don't get a big blob. And then very gently just tap that brush, and you can do it on the edge of your finger also, and we can get some yummy little extra bits of splatter in these pieces. That's always super fun. And I do this very gently. I'm not like going very hard. I'm not trying to splatter it all over my work surface. I just want an extra little element of, ooh, look at that, as you get closer to the piece and you see the details. All right, so I hope you enjoy giving this method a try out, and I'll see you next time.